Dun, 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 Daddy, no, Star Wars. Shit,
That's Star Wars.
fucking
No.
John Williams.
John Williams, damn you! I could do it, but then okay. No, I'll forget the dun dun duns because you've already done that.
I've done the dun
But it
dun
would be
duns.
it would
Come
be
together.
da 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 da. Superman's dad's dead. Da 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 da.
Jonathan.
His dad is dead. Yes, Superman's dad is dead, and this is Daddy Issues. We're back to talk about our favourite father and son moments from media, from pop culture, from films, books, comics, whatever. We just finished episode 2 about the many deaths of Thomas Wayne, so we're going to go on to a lesser character and talk about the fathers of Clark Kent, Kal-El, the Superman. So we're doing this episode right off the back of the Batman episode because we got into a little bit of a debate surrounding the movie Man of Steel and the portrayal of Jonathan Kent there. You're a big fan, I'm not a fan. So walk me through your arguments so that I can destroy them.
Well, you've set me up for fall there, haven't you, really? Jeepers, mister. Wow. It just came to my mind when we were talking about Thomas Wayne, because I mentioned that the Thomas Wayne deaths, as in terms of Daddy Issues, have never really got to me before. But something that gets to me every single time is when Jonathan Kent dies in Man of Steel. And I know you don't like that film. That's fine. That's your opinion. And fuck you. But also, I like it. Okay. I think part of it is that I think that relationship between Jonathan Kent and Kal-El is developed in a really beautiful way, and that the kind of that because I don't know if it's mentioned in Man of Steel, but maybe in other iterations, maybe in Smallville or whatever, they mentioned that Jonathan and Martha Kent wanted kids, but that they couldn't have their own. So one is very much literally dropped into their laps, and they have to raise this child who turns out to be a god amongst human beings. But yet what I've always liked about the Superman story anyway is that he's this farm boy from like middle America. He's raised as just a normal kid, a normal American. He's not like Bruce Wayne. He's not raised a billionaire. He's just a normal guy. Salt of the earth, exactly. Perfect. Perfect description. But something that's done really well in Man of Steel, I think, is that development of Clark Kent growing up and the lessons taught to him by his surrogate father, by Jonathan Kent. So you can get a real sense of the impact that Jonathan Kent has on Clark's life and his morality, a bit like what we talked about with Batman or Thomas Wayne, but it's only ever sort of a skim off the surface, whereas at least in Man of Steel and in other Superman movies too, you can see how much of what and who Clark is because of Jonathan Kent. Which maybe is a disservice to Martha, because I'm sure she was just as important, but they really play on that father-son relationship because of its dichotomy to the Kal-El Jor-El relationship, which he doesn't have until he's already a grown man.
Yes.
So when, spoiler alert, obviously, when Jonathan Kent dies in Man of Steel, it's after you've had all of this build-up and after you've gained an affection for that relationship and for him. And also the selflessness of the act, where he's been teaching Clark Kent not to use his powers or show off his powers and to seem normal because people won't understand and it will make his life difficult. And, he's only been looking out for him. And in the moment where he and Clark both know that Clark could save his life, it would be in front of a bunch of people. And what's more important to Jonathan is Clark being safe and being, having a simpler life and not having the stresses that would come with being open about who he really is, to the point where he'll sacrifice his life to maintain his son's anonymity, which is great. I find that so affecting, and especially in comparison to Thomas Wayne, it's just like, because that moment is just a freak incident of a mugging that turns into a murder. There's nothing anyone can do, and as we talked about, regardless of the actions of whichever Thomas Wayne we see, besides the Flashpoint one, which we touched But no matter what Thomas Wayne does, he and Martha will die always, over and over and over again.
Hmm.
And at least with Jonathan Kent, we've seen it done in a few different ways. And being a Zack Snyder film, Man of Steel is a bit more over the top and an epic way to die. Get swept up by a tornado. Fuck.
Yes.
It's much more impactful, I suppose, impactful physically. Because in the other iterations, like we've been looking at the Richard Donner Superman and Smallville as well, where it's a heart attack that takes him, which is much more tragic because I don't know about more. It's more tragic than Thomas Wayne to me, but it's tragic in the realm of Superman because this is an all-powerful character, a god, like I say, walking amongst people, and he could have saved Man of Steel Jonathan Kent from a tornado, but he can't save Smallville or Richard Donner Superman Jonathan Kent from a heart attack. This is one thing he just can't do. But having said that, I think those the heart attack deaths are probably even more dramatic than the tornado, but it still gets to me.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I much prefer the heart attack ones. Oh God, this is awful. I much prefer the heart attack ones because there is more of a focus there upon it's humbling, right? It is as we are saying with Clark Kent here. He is a god. He's a literal god among men. And it's a matter of choice and of principle. And the fact is that with the heart attack death of Jonathan Kent, there is nothing that he can do. And exactly, he is all-powerful, and there is no possible course of action he can take, like, aside from him Matrix Neoing his hand into Jonathan Kent's chest.
I was just thinking about that, actually, yeah.
Yeah, and then just, like, fucking pumping it until it starts beating again. Like, that's the only possible thing that he could do. Whereas with the tornado, like, it's Superman, right? Like, if he wanted to, not only could he rescue Jonathan Kent, he could run around that tornado so fast that it would reverse the polarity or whatever of the tornado, and the tornado would no longer exist.
Neutralize
he would neutralize the tornado. Like, a weather effect is nothing against him because he is Superman. And yeah, he's not actually Superman yet, he's just a boy.
I think that's the point there. He's not Superman yet, he's just...
Yeah, but that even if he can't physically stop the tornado, which he probably could, like, he could have saved everybody from there instantly, and everyone would have survived, but he doesn't because of some secret. That goes against the teachings of every other version of Jonathan and Martha Kent that exist. Because the way that they raise Clark is a matter of being selfless, right? It's saying whether people should not know about your secret. We don't want people to know who you are or what you can do. But if you have the chance to save somebody, you save them because it is somebody's life. Whereas in this one, Clark Kent pulls those kids out of the river, right? The bus drives in the river. Yeah, and then Clark Kent pulls them out. And Clark's like, what should I have done? Let them drown? And Jonathan Kent's like, yeah, probably.
Well,
okay, all right. He says maybe.
I get what you're saying here because he doesn't go. No, you're absolutely right. Always save people if you can. He goes. I'm not saying it. I'm just saying it's not that simple. There's something like that, isn't it?
Yeah, but no. He says no. Clark Kent says, "Should I have saved them?" And Jonathan Kent says, "Maybe." No, should I have let them drown? And Jonathan Kent says, maybe, because this idea is that Clark's secret is more important than the lives of a bus full of children.
Full of children. Yeah, that's
right.
Messed up.
It is messed up, and that's my problem with this Jonathan Kent. Is I'm watching it going, he is not a good dad. Like, if I saved someone's life and my dad was like, you shouldn't do that because the attention you'll get would be terrible. For like, I don't know, and I'd be like, Dad, what are you talking about? Like,
I think the only way I can relate to that is that when life is complicated, and sometimes it's not. There isn't like a gold standard, a black and white answer to if you can save somebody, always do it always because that's better than the risk you take in doing so.
Yeah,
because you understand why Jonathan wants to protect Clark's secret, but it's not as simple as, always do it except for this situation, or you know. So I get that it's complicated, and he's only trying to do what's best. But I guess it's quite nice to see that he's quite fallible, and he's not like godlike as a father figure, like we've talked about before. Can we see our fathers as these these perfect, flawless people until a certain age when you become a man and you go, oh wait, my dad was just a man too, and he's flawed and he's just human. And I'll be honest that I've never thought about it in those terms before. In terms of of course, save a buttload of kids from drowning. That should go without saying, really.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what I think. What you're saying is true, but there is another element to that. Like, as we grow up, we see our fathers like as the men that they are. But in Batman versus Superman, when we get the mountainside scene that you were just rewatching, like, it's made clear that Clark still idolizes Jonathan Kent over everybody else.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right? Jonathan Kent is still his idea of what a man should be, and this man was willing to let a busload of kids drown as long as his son's secret was safe. Right? Yeah. I get that it's his son, and you protect your child in all situations, but there is a darkness and a selfish aspect to that Jonathan Kent that I think it's perfect for the Zack Snyder DC movies, which are always dark, right? Everything is dark in this world. So, of course, Jonathan Kent is also dark. But one of the things that is beautiful about Superman as a character, one of the things that transcends him above other characters, is that he is above those decisions that make the world grey, right? For other people, it would be like, oh, I don't know if I can jump into that river to save the drowning person, because if I do that, I might die. And what about my kids? Right? Like, we are always balancing whether or not we should do something against, like, that we're balancing the morality of doing something against the real world implications of taking that action.
Yeah, of course.
Because our world is full of grey, right? But for Superman, the risk comes from not doing the thing that is right. And what is great about him as a character is that he is a character that exists in black and white, because he is so powerful that unless there is, like, I don't know, magic or, a literally kryptonite involved, he will always do the right thing, because he can always do the right thing. He's not bound by whether something is right or not, because his parents raised him to know what is right and what is wrong. And he acts on what is right and what is wrong. He doesn't act on a world full of grey. That's what Batman does, because his world was dark and his parents were murdered. So for me, the heart attack is a cleaner version of the Jonathan Kent character, because we see him as a good, honest farmer. And in that Richard Donner version that we were just watching, Clark Kent feels neutered, I guess. He feels a bit like he's a bit of a cuck. He's like, oh, I want to play football, but I can't. My parents won't let me play football. Kind of like that teenage. We get a lot of that in Smallville as well, like 2 seasons of that in Smallville. And Jonathan Kent basically says to him, the line was, Clark Kent says, "Would you tell a bird not to fly?" That kind of thing, right? And it's like, no, like, of course you should fly. You have to fly when it's right for you. And then he dies. And his parting message with the heart attack is, it is a humbling moment for this all-powerful God who can always do the right thing, except in this instant, because it's natural causes, I guess.
Yeah. It's done so well, that scene as well. We were just talking about how nicely that shot of them walking up through the field, and Jonathan's got his arm around Clark's shoulder, just being that paternal figure, and he kind of brings Clark around to understanding. I'm sure he's had the conversation a bunch of times, but just letting him know that this is just the way things are, and you're meant for so much more than scoring a touchdown in a football game. And Clark sort of jogs off to play with the dog. He's kind of happy in the end, and then that's when the tragedy strikes. And the actor who plays Jonathan Kent there just does such an amazing job of it. Like
he does
that real sudden. I want to find his name because he's Glenn Ford. He he just the way his face turns when he realizes something's going on, and he's like, I think he just all he says is, "Oh no," like he knows exactly what's happening, and in that "oh no," you kind of sense not just "oh no, I'm having a heart attack," but he's the kind of altruist that is thinking, "Oh no, what about Clark? What about Martha? What about the farm?"
Exactly. He's like, going now is terrible because Clark needs me to be there, right? My son needs me to guide him in the future. Whereas the Zack Snyder one is like, nah, don't worry about it, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Or it's not even you'll be fine. It's supposed to be some kind of sacrifice, right? But it's not even a sacrifice. It's just stupid because we know that Superman moves so fast that no one would see him move. Yeah, they would see Jonathan, but he could have just moved Jonathan somewhere else.
Yeah.
Or that he could have saved him.
What if 12 people in the heightened tension and terror of a tornado say they saw a kid run so fast that he rescued his dad from a tornado? Like, who's going to believe anyone? And that's not going to make worldwide news. That's not going to be a aliens live among us story. It's just a countryside folktale.
And I'm pretty sure you could say to those people, please don't say anything.
Yeah.
And people would, humans are terrible. But in that situation, I think people are going to be so traumatized by what's going on. Are they even looking at Jonathan? They're probably looking at the massive fucking tornado.
Yeah.
But,
at least he does save the dog. I mean, it's not a completely pointless exercise.
That's true. Join us on our next podcast, Doggy Issues, where we talk about...
No, I can't. No, there's no way we're doing that. I'm just about making it through the daddy issues. The doggy issues is a whole bigger kettle of fish.
All right, doggy style, dogging. I don't know. We've got a whole bunch of different...
Well, their titles might need some work. But at least in the meantime, you've managed to destroy Man of Steel for me, so I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Because, all right, let's talk about the next Man of Steel scene, the one in Batman vs. Superman, right? So Superman, his life is a bit crap. Lex Luthor is making him look bad in the press, and for some reason he's really taken that to heart because he's a Zack Snyder character. He hasn't looked down at the world and gone, well, they can say really whatever they want. I'm going to keep doing the right thing. Instead, his mother, when he said, be the hero they need, Clark, or don't. You don't owe them a damn thing. Martha, what are you talking about? Don't tell him that. But you had
he's such a
he is. It's like turning around to God and being like, you know what? You should just leave mankind to die. Like, have you watched Preacher? I haven't seen much of it. I've read a bit of it.
Season 1, and I got the first graphic novel. Yeah.
Yeah, well, in Preacher, the whole point of Preacher is that God is missing, right?
Yeah.
God is missing in Preacher because Martha Kent told him to. Like, you don't owe them a damn thing. So after being told that, forget humanity, whatever, Clark Kent climbs up a mountain for some reason, a mountain that's so dangerous that, he's going to die, except he's not going to die, he's Superman. It doesn't matter which mountain it is. He's still Superman.
Yeah, he can walk up an Arctic mountain with this, it's not going to bother him.
Yeah, he could have his dick swinging in the wind in Mount Everest, and it's not going to bother him.
Well, I don't imagine the Fortress of Solitude has got central heating, so I'm sure cold doesn't really bother him too much.
Exactly. So what happens when he gets to the top of that mountain? What does he see?
He sees good old Jonathan Kent.
He's back. Somehow he's back.
He's back. And doing typical Jonathan Kent farmer, salt of the earth kind of stuff. He's piling rocks. Which I'm not sure, I was just watching the clip before we started this. That's kind of that's how graves are marked, isn't it, in certain parts of the world. So is he building a landmark to himself? Or is Clark he got to the top of the mountain, saw that someone had built this grave, so maybe somebody died on the mountain or whatever, and now he's imagining Jonathan Kent just doing something with his hands just to make it so he's not just standing there like Jor-El, like the projections of Jor-El on the Kryptonian ship. He's all just sort of standing there with his hands across his chest, like, I'm Russell Crowe. Commander.
Cut.
My name is Jor-El, commander of the armies of the North and servant to the true emperor, Marcus Aurelius. Oh wait, I'm getting my films mixed up. Russell Crowe movies.
And then when he's at the top, when Clark Kent is at the top of the mountain with his hallucinatory father, his second hallucinatory father. He's up there. His dad's burying himself. Maybe his body was flung up there by the tornado. I don't know. Maybe he's still alive at the top of this mountain. He just hasn't found his way down yet. So he's at the top of the mountain. His dad tells him another heartwarming, inspiring story to make him go back and be the hope of humanity. What does he tell him?
He tells him a story about how, and when he was a kid, a neighbour's farm was flooding. So him and his pop ran down there and helped dig out some storm trenches to drain the water away from their neighbour's land, and saved their land or whatever. And he tells that little detail about when they got home, his Clark's grandma baked him a hero pie or something and told him how great a hero he was. And what they didn't know was that the water they'd redirected from their neighbour's farm ran to another farm, flooded their land, and drowned all their horses, whilst Jonathan Kent was sat at home eating his pie and being called a hero.
Yeah. What a fantastic, heartwarming story for all the family. Right?
Cheers, Dad.
Dad, I don't know if you know, I'm really going through something right now. Could you give me some solace or some advice?
Well, here's a story about how I fucked up.
How about the time I drowned some horses? Thanks, Dad.
But of course, there is a point to that story.
Okay, what's the moral? What's the moral of drowning the horses?
The moral of drowning the horses. I guess he's trying to tell Clark that sometimes, no matter how hard you try to do the right thing, some bad things that will happen out of your control, no matter what you do. And it's a matter of, and he tells a story about, he carries on the story to say, when Clark asks him, did the nightmares ever stop? Because Jonathan says that he used to wake up in the middle of the night hearing the horses wailing and shit, which is traumatic. Can you imagine that?
Yeah. This is a superhero movie for kids, remember?
Yeah, of course, yeah. And when Clark asks, did the nightmares ever stop? Jonathan says, it was when I met your mother, when I met Martha. And she made me see that there was some hope left in the world and whatnot. Ugh. Which I suppose then inspires Clark to be like, that's true, Martha is pretty nice. Maybe I'll go back to being a hero again. I'm not quite sure where the link lies there. But then there is a moment where there's a bit of a beat and Jonathan says, I miss you, son. Of course, this is imaginary Jonathan Kent in Clark's head saying, I miss you. And then Clark says, I miss you too, Dad. And then he's gone.
Yeah.
And what's annoying me about this right now, Dom, is that moment and the tornado moment affect me, and they remind me of my own morality and my own shortcomings, and they remind me that I feel and I'm not cold and dead inside. I have an emotional compass somewhere. And in discussing them with you, you've ruined it. Now I'm all pragmatic and I'm seeing the logic behind things, which is usually what I get accused of doing in my usual relationships. But in my relationships with superhero films, that I can ignore that part of myself until I talk to Dominic about them, in which case it comes crumbling back down to reality.
Yeah, that is because of my lack of heart, my ice cold. No, yeah. Again, it's one of the things that's so beautiful, as I was saying, what's so beautiful about the character of Superman is his simplicity in these situations. Yes, his actions have consequences. All actions should have consequences. And you should do the right thing even though doing the right thing can have consequences. Okay, that's a fine lesson to learn. I think the problem here is the writing and the way in which these lessons are being taught. Because the message that Jonathan Kent is trying to get across is not a terrible message, except for, did the nightmares ever end? Yeah, they ended when I met your mother. Okay, that sounds like a pretty, a romantic thing to say, I guess. But what it's really saying is your humanity is tied to the one person that you love, right? And that is a dangerous message to be telling, especially for Superman, because these plots were never like fully realized, but in Justice League they were supposed to be done, was that the only thing that connects Clark Kent to humanity is Lois Lane
Yeah.
in this world, right? And then if Lois Lane were to die, Superman would have no connection to humanity, so he would, I don't know, conquer the world or do something terrible. But that's not the character if Jonathan Kent is good, right? If we have a good Jonathan Kent, Clark doesn't have a lack of humanity because he was raised as a human. He is a human who happens to be an alien, right? He's not an alien who has come to Earth and then had to pretend to be human. He is human, but all of his alien characteristics are secondary to that. And in Kill Bill, there's that bit with Bill at the end. He's got Uma Thurman drugged or something stuck in the chair, and Quentin Tarantino really goes on a big rant about how Superman and Clark Kent are an interesting character because Clark Kent is how Superman views reality. He's this weak character who wears glasses and who is bumbling, and that is how Superman sees humanity, is as this weak bumbling buffoon, basically. But I don't think that's necessarily... Oh, and the Superman is his reality, right? But that's not true, because he didn't know he was Superman until he was already a man, until he developed these amazing abilities. So he is always the person that his parents made him. He's not someone who will lose his humanity because people were saying nasty things about him in the newspaper, right? Like, he's a human who can do incredible things, but he's not going to turn his back on everyone just because, they called him a bitch. So yeah, that's another reason I kind of like the Smallville version. Is the Smallville version is kind of a mixture between the two. I think the Richard Donner one and the Zack Snyder one, where he's a good old fashioned Kansas, probably Republican, very Christian. He's the grown-up version of the old Duke boys from the Dukes of Hazzard, because he is one of the Dukes.
Exactly,
of Hazzard,
is that? Yeah.
It's
like very resistant to times changing and
yes,
help. He's very independent and
yes.
But I'm sure he's got a Confederate flag somewhere.
Yeah, but his Confederate flag isn't a racist thing. It's a holding on to the strength of our roots thing.
Yeah,
for the right reasons. Yeah. If I don't know if there is a right reason to have it. I'm not saying there is a right reason to have a Confederate flag. But if he did have one, it's not because he's a massive racist.
Maybe it's on the roof of his tractor.
Yeah, maybe. No, when he was younger, he probably had a Confederate flag painted on his. And then, as he got older, he realized, oh, okay, I see what this. And then he painted over it, because I reckon that's what. As he grew out of that phase, yeah, I think he's somewhere in between our two Jonathan Kents, our 1970s one, and our modern day Darker Take, where he's trying to protect this secret, but really what he's trying to do is the right thing. We get another heart attack death with that Jonathan Kent there.
But that one comes out of a moment of stress, not comes out of like a complete left field moment of peace and clarity.
Yeah, and it comes out of a moment of stress because someone knows Clark's secret.
Yeah.
And so we get a kind of a weaving of those two things. He's not in trying to protect Clark's secret. He also dies. I guess that's fairly similar to the modern one.
Yeah.
Except for there's a bit more subtlety going on there, and the life lessons I think are a bit better from that one. But
yeah, I think so. I think it was done quite well. I remember I guess that would have happened when we were still fairly young. When that.
Yeah.
That's whatever. I think that's season 5. Smallville, so like 2006 or something. So yeah, I would have still been in my teens, and I think that did affect me a little bit then. Especially because the thing with a TV series is you don't just get invested with a character or a relationship over an hour or an hour and a half, however long it is into the film where this happens. You've had 5 years of Jonathan Kent being the mentor and father to Clark Kent, and then he's stripped away in a moment of drama and tension. Like that was, and then but also obviously the terribly morose funeral scenes that follow and surround it, and
My God, there are so many funeral scenes in that show. It's ridiculous. For a show about Superman, an all-powerful being who can save people from death, like I'm pretty sure they're in a funeral every other episode. I don't know anyone who's been to as many funerals as those people. Like, and it's always raining. It never rains in Kansas unless there's a funeral, and then like you can count on it.
You might be right there.
Yeah.
Or maybe they plan the funerals around the weather. So it's going to be raining on Sunday, so we'll have a funeral then for extra drama and pathos.
Yeah, we'll just leave the corpse for a couple of weeks until it rains, and then we'll get it done. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, we've got some time. Should we quickly talk about his other dad, Superman's other dad? We have Jor-El, I think, is a pretty good counterpoint. He's usually used as a counterpoint to the lessons and simple nature of Clark Kent, because we have this traditional farm man, Clark Kent. He's lived in the same land as his family has for generations, and he wants to pass the farm on to his son, but his son is destined for great things. And he's a very classically American character. Then, on the other hand, we have Jor-El, the super scientist space alien, who builds a rocket to send his son fucking faster than the speed of light to Earth.
He's like some kind of like warrior scientist based on the Man of Steel flashbacks. He's got like a giant suit of armor, and he like takes down a bunch of soldiers. It's like, wait, isn't this guy a scientist?
Yeah, and he flies on the back of a... I don't know what that thing was. Yes, a winged beast. Yeah, that's a perfect definition. Yes, winged beast. Okay, so let's start again with the Richard Donner version. So we have Jor-El is in it for about 5 seconds, as played by Marlon Brando, in the highest paid performance of all time, I think.
Is that relevant? In balance to the screen minutes, or just?
No, for anyone ever. Let me have a look. Marlon Brando, Superman. I think he got at this point, no one had ever been paid as much money for a role as Marlon Brando was paid for that role as Jor-El.
Does he actually do any like on set stuff? Or is it all just like recordings in the?
No, he does. He is on set at the beginning, because they have that like white nightmare version of Krypton that is really horrible. It's like a science fiction, like kind of shit show, really.
A science fiction shit show.
It is. He asked for so much money to be in the role that in Superman 2 they just took footage from him from Superman 1 and put it back in there again, because they didn't want to pay him again. So he sued them for like $50 million or something.
Did he win?
I'm not sure. He asked for a salary of $3.7 million and 11.75% of the box office profits.
11%?
So he earned $19 million for his role in Superman, which he's in for like 4 minutes. Right? It's crazy how little he's in it. But again, it's Marlon Brando. He's one of the greatest actors of all time. I think what's pretty good about this version of the character is that he's incredibly aloof and removed, and he's not relatable, nowhere near relatable in the same way that our heart attack Jonathan Kent is. Yeah. This guy, he's the embodiment of everything that is science and advanced. And
in the way we talked about fathers, we see our fathers as gods up to a certain age. Like he's the embodiment of that kind of that kind of what am I trying to say, representation of a father figure. Like he is this all-powerful, disconnected being who provides guidance, but then also scolding when things don't go right. The only thing he doesn't do is bend him over and give him a smack bottom.
That's very true. And then he calls Clark to the Fortress of Solitude, and he becomes Superman and whatever, which is great. I think Marlon Brando's version is pretty good. He's not in it very much. Is his role worth that amount of money?
No, because no. This is
Yeah.
this is like the mental Marlon Brando era. Like this is way after like On the Waterfront and A Streetcar
Yes.
Named Desire, where he made his name as like one of the greatest working actors, and he'd become old and fat by that point. He was just being a bit of a crazy person.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, if he was at all balanced and well adjusted, he wouldn't be demanding millions of dollars just for doing a few lines of dialogue in a superhero movie.
Yeah, what's even better about that role, I'd forgotten about this, was that he refused to memorize the dialogue. He refused to memorize the script. He was like, "This script is ridiculous. I'm not going to memorize it." So what they had to do was they had to write down his dialogue on, like, I don't know, a bit of card on cue cards, and then show it to him so that he could read off the cue cards what he was supposed to say.
That's what I mean. He's a nutcase. But then he in The Godfather he did the same thing. When he there's a famous photo of him acting opposite Robert Duvall, who was not on camera for the scene, but Robert Duvall was there to do his lines back to him. And Marlon Brando's dialogue is taped to the front of Robert Duvall's suit because again he just couldn't be bothered to memorize it, so he just read it off of his co-star.
That's beautiful. I love
And
that.
one more
Yeah.
Marlon Brando story just for lols. He
Yeah.
when he did the score in 2004, whatever that was, with Edward Norton. A lot of the scenes where he shot were like him sat at a bar, and he's like, "Well, if my lower half isn't going to be in the shot, I'm not wearing pants." And he just refused to wear trousers. He would just show up to set in his pants and the top half of his costume and sit on this stool and be like, "Shoot me from the waist up."
You know what I was saying earlier on about how, when you're Superman, you're above the morality of humans, right? You're above the grey. You just exist you just exist in good and bad.
Yeah.
I feel like this is exactly the same thing for Marlon Brando. Yeah, where he's reached such a level of being Marlon Brando that he's like, I'm not even gonna wear pants.
Yeah. It's like, you saw The Godfather, you saw Apocalypse Now, I can do whatever I want.
Yeah, you know who I am, and I'm not wearing pants. That is great. Okay, so I feel like his version of the character is okay, but everything the baggage that comes with it being Marlon Brando is a bit heavy-handed. Smallville, I don't really remember. I think Jor-El is just like a psychic voice. We don't see a body for him, at least as far as I watched. Maybe in later series you do, but
that's a good point. Yeah,
I don't remember what it was.
I don't really remember Jor-El much either.
Yeah.
Then let's
jump.
Cast. Sorry, no.
Let's jump. Let's jump straight over to Russell Crowe. Russell Crowe, fresh out of an Australian bar fight, straight into Krypton.
Oh, sorry, I just realised Terrence Stamp did the voice of Jor-El in Smallville.
Did he? Oh, but he was Zod. He was Zod in the Superman one. Yeah, that is cool.
How about that?
Terrence Stamp is awesome. He's a really great actor. I love Terrence Stamp.
Anyway, sorry, what were you saying?
But moving past it. I was just going to spend the next 2 minutes thinking about Terrence Stamp, but we'll leave him behind and kneel before Zod later and go straight over to Russell Crowe. So we have Russell Crowe facing off against that amazing actor whose name I can never remember.
Michael
Who's the
Shannon.
guy who plays Zod? Michael Shannon. I love Michael Shannon. I love him so much I can't even remember his name. That's how much I like. I think he is perfect casting for Zod.
Yeah,
in
he
this
was
movie.
brilliant.
Yeah, he's really great. What do you think about Russell Crowe as Superman's alien dad on an alien world, looking like an alien man who still is the same as Russell Crowe in everything else he's been in?
Well, I liked that they gave him a bit of I like they gave him something to do besides being a disembodied head or a disembodied voice. Just they gave us a bit of a sense of who he was and what he went through in order to get Clark off of Krypton. So yeah, I mean, it's fine. I guess I'm ambivalent to it. I have no strong feelings about it, but I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And that moment, I don't know if we talked about it off pod, which is our new favourite catchphrase, off pod. I don't know if we talked about it before, where he's doing all of his science bits, and then Jor-El and his dudes show up to apprehend him because they're performing a coup of the planet, and you're like, oh wow, this is not going well for the House of El, and then Jor-El just like busts out some Kryptonian kung fu shit and takes out like 3 soldiers and you're like, oh, okay, and then he puts on like a giant suit of armor.
Yes,
This is a different kind of Jor-El than we've seen before.
yes, this is definitely a Zack Snyder Jor-El. And what's really interesting about this version of Superman is that they very heavily lean into the idea of sterility and cloning that has been done in the comics but never really touched on in the movies or the cartoons. This idea that Krypton was very much like a Roman Empire at its peak. Like it's declining. And
it feels very much like that in Man of Steel, actually, with the whole
Yes.
council of like it's very much like
it's like the Empire is literally crumbling apart. Like the Kryptonian race can no longer even have children; they have to clone, and so everyone is split into different roles. Like your role is assigned at birth. You are born and raised as a soldier, which brings an interesting character dimension to Zod, which they touch on but don't ever develop enough. Which really annoys me is that in this movie we have Zod is a soldier who wants to rebuild Krypton and save Krypton because that is what he was born to do. It is literally in his DNA. Like every action he takes here isn't because he's a villain, it's because this is how he was created. Yeah, and I really like that, and I wish that they had kind of let on that a little bit more. Then we see the scientist, Jor-El, Russell Crowe. He's a scientist who is also a soldier, who is like surely if we were looking at a scientist guy, he would not be capable of the superhero action star we are. Like where does this come from in the character? He seems to be vastly capable of things that he should not be capable of.
Well, maybe it's the fact that he isn't just a regular scientist. If he was assigned to the science as from birth, he's obviously advanced to the heights of whatever that they are capable of as a race, right? I mean, they talk about how no natural birth has occurred on Krypton for generations, and yet he has managed to do so with Lara. Is it Lara?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I kind of imagined that he's taken it upon himself because he probably knew what was coming. He knew Krypton was going down the tubes. Yeah. So he's probably taken it upon himself to learn a bit of physicality because he knew at some point it would come to that.
Yeah, I guess he is a man who is seeing, like, he's pulling out all the stops because the world is coming to an end and no one is listening to him, and there's literally only one thing to do now. I think just for me, it's a shame. Like, I really like, again, that element of the character, but I wish they could have shown it more in terms of, like, the sheer determination of this character, because the problem I have there is that we see that he is vastly capable of ridiculously incredible things, right? So when we find out that, Clark Kent is Superman, it's like, well, yeah, did you see what his dad could do when he didn't even have superpowers, right? Whereas if we had seen Jor-El really struggling to do all of those things, like at the end, he actually beats Zod in a fist fight.
Yeah.
Right? And then Zod, like, only kills him because of some sneaky... like he does some sneaky stuff, and that's what allows him to best him. But if in people who are bred through eugenics and through cloning, a scientist should never be beating a soldier, especially a general, in this kind of situation, right? So yeah, I think he's been given too many heroic things. It should have been like he tries to fight Zod, and he's doing what he can. He's holding him off because he's determined to save his son, but like. He's never going to beat Zod. He just can't. It's Zod, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I have problems with Zack Snyder. Have you noticed this over the last couple of episodes?
I've lost a bit of faith in Mr. Snyder, to be honest. But you have to have some sympathy for his situation.
Yeah, well, yeah, he's got some daddy's issues of his own, which is a real, that's a real shame.
A real tragedy. Yeah.
Yeah, Christ. But let's not get stuck down. Let's not get stuck down in real, actual daddy issues, because then everything falls apart if we do that. Then we'll be crying and we'll have to message Zack Snyder, and I'll have to apologize for all the critiques I have of his movies, which is that's another thing altogether. Okay, well, I feel like we've touched on a lot of the Jonathan Kent and Jor-El stuff. Is there anything else you have to say about these two father figures? What about their impact on you? Last time with Thomas Wayne, we said which one of these of the Thomas Waynes do you feel is closest to your father? Which one of the Jonathan Kents and the Jor-Els do you feel is closest to your dad?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I think if I analyse why Kevin Costner's Jonathan Kent affected me so much, it might be because I've kind of been confused by my dad's life lessons to me sometimes.
Yeah.
And
Has your dad ever been like, "No, I'm going to stand in this tornado"?
no, well, luckily not.
Okay.
But I mean, I can't think of many other instances. I think the Smallville Jonathan Kent. I suppose he was quite heroic and kind of in a man's man way. Just got on and did man's things. He was, like you said, salt of the earth. Just got on with it, and he was heroic in a smaller way. Whereas we see a bit of that in Man of Steel, but then we have that big moment where he sacrifices himself to save a dog, and that's sweet.
Mm.
So I suppose in the sense that I'm still getting over my my perception of my dad as a superhero or as whatever. So I think maybe it's Kevin Costner's Jonathan Kent. I can't say that I really get. I suppose that actually, if I'm thinking about I'm obsessed with Man of Steel apparently because that's all I'm thinking about. But
Yeah.
Russell Crowe's Jor-El has that kind of intelligence, I suppose, which I find intimidating in father figures.
Oh, you find it intimidating in father figures?
Yeah, because it becomes harder to impress somebody like that. And I think
Interesting.
I think maybe I'm speaking for just only for myself, but I think we're all trying to impress our fathers to some degree.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, and even if you're estranged from your father or you hate your father, you probably want to impress him just to show him up. But if you look up to your father, like some people, like other people do, and I know I do, it becomes a bit of a stressful thing to think about whether that's going to make your father proud of you or not, or whether he's going to understand what you're doing or whatever. So yeah, I think there must be something in that, because I mean I've actually I don't know if this is a strange thing to say, but I've always related to the Superman character in some way, or maybe it's Clark Kent, I don't know, but I've always had a bit of an affinity for the character. I can certainly relate to that character a lot better than I can relate to Batman. Or a lot of other superheroes. I'm not quite sure why that is. I don't know. Maybe it's a bit of an outsider syndrome. Alien walking among us, trying to blend in. But yeah, so I think both of his father figures kind of combine to form some kind of mirror to my own life. I think so. Yeah, I find that very interesting. And what began as just a little quick bonus episode has kind of turned into another diatribe where we've gone on for a good 50 minutes.
Yeah.
So we obviously have a lot to explore.
I don't know. I find it difficult to pick it out. I don't feel that either my dad or my stepdad have that kind of intellectually superior attitude, that same kind of thing that you're talking about there. I don't really feel that in either of them. I think they're both definitely Jonathan Kent characters, but they're just different. They're different iterations of that Jonathan Kent. I can't put my fingers on which. Maybe if I were to put them together, they would probably be closest to the Smallville Jonathan Kent, I think, because in that character we see someone who is a bit more conflicted. When Jonathan Kent dies in Smallville, he's just been running for senator or state senator or whatever, right? He's like, even though his son is Superman and they're trying to hide that fact, he's drawing public attention to himself because he feels that it's the right thing to do. And I feel like that sense of doing the right thing is something that I definitely associate with both of my father figures.
Yeah.
Neither of them have died of heart attacks, thank Christ. So that's not something that I particularly relate to with them. But yeah, I definitely see the two of them as being moral, that kind of moral guide rather than someone who is don't know. I'm not really sure the role that Jor-El plays. I guess it's coming to know the parts of yourself that are true, but that you don't understand. Right, Jonathan Kent tries to help you understand yourself as you grow up, but there are always parts of self-discovery that you do like long into being an adult. I feel like that Jor-El character is maybe Jor-El is a representation of what we were saying earlier about you after you see your father for the person who he is, as you try and discover your own masculinity, decide the man that you want to be. You've had your father's guidance, but now it's time to decide who you're going to be for yourself. Will you be the kind of man that your father has raised you to be, or is there another path that you have in mind? I think Jor-El is a good part of that decision, I think.
Yeah, I wonder now. I'm just thinking now. I wonder if Jonathan Kent represents the father you have as you grow and as you develop, and from who brings you through your childhood into being a young adult. And then Jor-El is more like the mentor that you have as an adult, who teaches you how to function as a man in the world, as opposed to giving you all the right moral lessons you need to develop your sense of morality and your sense of right and wrong. So yeah, the kind of divide. Jor-El comes back into Clark Kent's life when he's an adult, as we've said. So, and Jonathan Kent left his life when he was young. So there's only this little gap in the middle there between. It's a bit like in the Bible. Whoa! Are you ready for this?
Oh Christ!
No, exactly. Christ. Up to a certain age, Jesus Christ was raised by Joseph the carpenter, and then there's this weird gap in the Bible between when he's told that he's the Son of God and he will save all of humanity, and then when he's like 13 or whatever, and then he suddenly, the next time you see Christ in the Bible, he's like 30, and now he's being, his mentor is God himself. So there's this kind of a slight parallel between Joseph the carpenter, man of the earth, working class hero, and Jonathan Kent, and then the all-powerful godlike being that is Jor-El with the Christian God. That's weird, isn't it? As well as having that gap in the middle between, because we never really see, apart from, I guess, Smallville kind of bridged it, what Clark gets up to when he has neither Jonathan Kent nor Jor-El.
It's very close, but it's interesting. I think in Smallville, Jor-El arrives a little bit before Jonathan Kent dies, but I like that idea that Jor-El doesn't reveal himself essentially until Jonathan Kent dies. It's that same thing we spoke about in the first episode. We say you don't become your own man until the death of your father. Well, Clark Kent was always following what Jonathan Kent thought he should do. Clark was always following what his father taught him until his father dies, and then he has to discover himself. But in discovering himself, he discovers his biological father, I guess. Which is interesting. I think what you've said is a really nice parallel to the Bible story. But also, if there is no Joseph, if there is no Jonathan Kent, then you don't have that humble, salt of the earth Messiah figure that you need. You have the arrogance the arrogance that comes with power, that comes with being raised, knowing that you are, knowing how powerful you are going to be and the things that you are capable of. Of course, you would see everybody else as being, a lower being to you. If you are like the Son of God, everyone else is, well, what are they? They're just creations. You're the only person in existence that wasn't, descended from sin. So, you need that human father figure there to make sure that when you become your own man, when you leave their shadow, that you can step forward as someone worthy of that power, like Thor, rather than being Nice you need to be adult Thor, not young Thor, where he's all arrogant and a douchebag.
Yeah, don't be a douchebag is the overriding message of the whole.
It is. That's if there was one lesson that Jonathan Kent tried to teach his son, it was don't be a douchebag, I think.
Yeah, and sometimes a bus full of kids drowning is okay.
You don't always have to save them. Look, do any of them know your secret? 2 of them do. Just push them back in. Save the bus. Take the bus out. Just push them. Put their heads just back underwater, and just whistle a little tune until they stop struggling. Yeah. The lessons of Jonathan Kent. There we go.
One quick last thing in terms of the morality of Clark Kent and where it comes from, and we talked about in the last episode, Batman choosing the non-lethal brand of justice because his parents were murdered in front of him, so he's completely against that. And there was all that the controversy around Man of Steel, where he's at an impasse with Zod. He can't beat him physically until there's that moment where he decides that the only way he can't restrain Zod. He can't bring him in for he can't take him in for questioning, or he can't be tried. The only way to stop him is to kill him, and that goes against his whole morality. And that moment where he makes that decision and snaps his neck and he cries to the heavens, I think that's always got to me a bit as well, because I guess it felt like I didn't want to have to ever do this. Like this is completely against what my father taught me, and that pain in him that he goes that far, I think is quite related to the lessons of his father.
Mm.
But anyway, I just wanted to touch on that before we wrap up.
Yeah, but is it though? See, that's my problem with that moment, is I don't feel there is ever a part in that movie where Jonathan Kent is like, all life is sacred and you have the ability to crush anything like a bug, but you have a responsibility to be better than that.
Oh,
I don't feel like that. There's that bit where he gets a bit bullied, and Jonathan Kent basically says, "Yeah, you should have just smacked him." I don't think he says. I don't think he says that. But yeah, but it's kind of like, again, it's that same thing where I never really connect his upbringing to that moment, because again, it's the same thing with the bus, right? It's like there is no. They are operating in such a moral grey. His father is so encompassed in this the black and white dynamic that when it comes to fighting Zod, why is he so upset about it? His dad was more than willing to let Lana Lang, cop it. So why is he so upset when it's Zod? Zod just killed everybody.
I think that's so why is he upset about it? Yeah, that's absolutely right, because I think there's something to be said about how many times we have to revisit an origin story of a character with every new movie that comes out, every new iteration of it. Because I guess I'm taking, and I guess Zack Snyder's assuming that everyone is taking that morality from other, like we've all know Superman's morality at this point. Like maybe he tried to show a little bit of where it comes from with that bullying scene, but it really feels, you're right. You've brought this to my attention now, that it doesn't actually, in the context of that one movie, that is not laid out, that is not seeded before. It's just, you kind of, as someone who's seen a Superman movie before, or like we are fans who are into it in the greater universe, we know that that's not really what he would do. And the fact that he does it because out of desperation, he feels like he has to, and it pains him, we go, oh yeah, of course, because Superman wouldn't want to do that. But then actually, you're right, within the framework of the film, that doesn't pay off any kind of setup.
No, there's the Chet. Yes, the idea of Chekhov's gun, right, from the Russian playwright Chekhov of the Seagull and the Cherry Orchard. Well, the idea of Chekhov's gun is he's a Russian playwright from the late 19th century, and Chekhov's gun is a storytelling motif, which is pretty, everyone uses it whether they know it or not, really. But the idea of Chekhov's gun is, if in the first act of your story you show a gun, by the end of the play or the film, that gun has to have been fired, right? You don't highlight something or establish something if it doesn't pay off. So it doesn't always have to be a gun, but like Pixar movies are perfect for this. The reason that Pixar movies are so predictable story-wise is because they check off gun everything. Everything is established in the movie, and you know that if they are highlighting something, that it is going to pay off later. And that is how that scene is trying to play out. Right? We are having this great climactic battle at the end that has emotional stakes because it's supposed to have been Chekhov guns. That fight at the end where he has to kill somebody is supposed to call back to earlier in the film where he is told killing people, you can kill people, but you are better than that. Right? And that never happens. So this payoff is paying off nothing because it's not established that life is something he holds sacred. In fact, Superman doesn't hold life sacred in that movie because he just lets his dad die. What would have been better in that film is if the tornado is coming, right? Jor-El is about to be killed by the tornado. Jonathan Kent is about to be killed by the tornado, about to be sucked up. Jonathan Kent makes his choice to sacrifice his life, because that's what that scene is showing, is Jonathan Kent is willing to put his life is not as important as his son's, so he sacrifices himself. Great. What should have happened there is Clark Kent saves him anyway. Right? He's there, he's about to get hit by that tornado. His father, this whole time, his father has been like, you've got to keep your secret, you've got to protect yourself. But he disobeys his father, he saves him from that tornado. And then Jonathan Kent's like, what are you doing? And he's like, life is more important. Other people's lives, other lives are more important than any secret. And then after that, we show Jonathan Kent being sick and dying, right? After. So even though Superman saved him from that tornado, that action was important, but it didn't save him forever because life still happens. Nature still takes its course. Which would have established that Superman is willing to go against his father's wishes for the greater good, but also that he can't save everyone. Even if he saves you once, the world is still the world. If you are alive, it still means you are going to die. And then his father's death establishes a love for life. So at the end of the movie, when he has to kill Zod, we understand that he doesn't want to kill anybody because everyone's lives are important, no matter how short they are, no matter who that person is. And they could have taken more time to establish the importance of Kryptonians to Superman. He's the last of his race. He's convinced that there aren't any more like him. And then they appear out of the sky. And he just fights them. He doesn't really... There's like one dialogue scene on the deck of the ship where he's like, we should try and work it out. And Zod's like, yeah, we're going to work it out. And then Zod kills him, right? It's like... If they had established that Superman doesn't want to fight the Kryptonians because there aren't any of them left, and it's really important that they save this race because that's what his other father would have wanted, and Superman, killing Zod is traumatic because it's killing the last of his people, there's a lot you have to imply from the movie that you can't get from the storytelling of the movie, from the language of the film, that it's not giving you. You have to call upon, he's Superman, and Superman doesn't like killing people. Like, that's what you have to pull from the lore, but the movie takes so much time going against the lore up until that point that, I don't know. For me, it just,
Yeah, I think you're probably right. That would have made it better. The only thing I could think of is that with Batman vs Superman, and probably with Justice League as well, rather.
Yes.
The full version is much longer than the version we ever get to see, and at least with Dawn of Justice, there was an Ultimate Edition where it included everything Zack Snyder wanted to include, and it made the story make more sense. Perhaps there was a longer cut of Man of Steel where these things were seeded properly and paid off properly, but he just wasn't allowed to include it, or But yeah, you're right. In terms of what we get to see, that all of your suggestions would have improved it. I'll concede.
Yeah, it's just it's such a dark representation of what should be a light character. The symbol on his chest means hope. That is what the S is a, it's not actually an S. It's a Kryptonian, the symbol of the House of L, a symbol that means like, to be hopeful for the future. So why is he willing to let his dad die like that? Yeah. That's what I take away from that moment, right? It's not the decision that Jonathan Kent makes. It's the failure of his son, the cowardice of his son. Jonathan Kent has said, no, your life is worth more than mine. That is an understandable sacrifice for a father to make, right? Like, we understand that a father is willing to do that for their children, that parents are willing to give their own life to say, like, that's built into our evolution, that you are willing to give your life to protect your offspring. But for the son to just stand there and do nothing, yeah, that.
Yeah.
It actually makes me angry. For the reason we're doing this podcast, for the opposite reason. Like, Clark has made a decision to let his father die. And in what world is a son justified in letting his father die when he has the ability to save him and not really a good reason not to?
Yeah, I see what you mean, but I take it the other way. I take it as a tragedy. I take it that he did what he was told when he probably shouldn't have done, and now he's got to live with that for the rest of his life, and that was a mistake. And he probably has gone on, lived his life thinking, I should, like, there's no version of that he's played out in his mind where he goes, no, maybe I would have stayed under the bridge. Like, in every version he's recounted, he would rather have saved him. And that mistake kind of, I suppose, maybe adds to his humanity a little bit. Like, he isn't this perfect being who always makes the right decision. Like, even going all the way back to his formative years, he still made an error because he was just being a good son, doing as he was told, when that was a moment where he could have become a man. And like you said, if he had taken matters into his own hands, done what he thought was right, that would have maybe been a better part of his arc. It would have taken us along with him a bit smoother. But yes, like I said, I definitely see where you're coming from.
Yeah. Just a little extra thing to close out after the intensity of that. Marlon Brando, back during the filming of Superman. The movie was supposed to be shooting in Rome, in Italy. With sets were being made and tests were being done. They were trying to test the Superman to fly, but the flying tests weren't working. Anyway, then they tried to get Marlon Brando in to come and to start shooting in Italy. But then they found out when they tried to get him in, he couldn't film in Italy because there was a warrant out for his arrest after a sexual obscenity charge from a previous movie.
Oh, well, that's nice.
That is such a perfect Marlon Brando story.
Classic
You've paid him $19 million to be in your film, and he can't even film it because there's a warrant out for his arrest. Mwah. Beautiful. Okay, well, does that bring our Daddy Issues episode to a close?
I think so, yeah. Can't think of much else.
Perfect.
We've covered it pretty well, I think.
I think so. Yeah, this ended up going on for much longer than I thought it would. You were right.
Yeah, this is a whole full episode in itself.
It has. What do you want to talk about next time?
Oh, well, I don't know. I'll be afraid to mention anything now in case you're like, let's do it right now.
I think what we should do is we've in the first episode. What did we look at in the first episode? Oh, Lion King. Of course, Lion King. We've done a really great animated movie. We've done two superhero movies. I would like to go back to do another animated film. This time I would like to pick up a Pixar one, as they really kind of refined those storytelling techniques that Disney were playing with. I want to take a look at Finding Nemo, which is the classic father-son adventure story, I guess. Do you fancy Finding Nemo?
Yeah, definitely. Let's do that. Sounds good.
Yeah, all right. Then next time we will look and undoubtedly cry at Finding Nemo.
Undoubtedly and guaranteed.
Thank you for listening to Daddy Issues. Oh, what are people supposed to say? You have to. If you have listened to all of this, you have to like it. You have to share it. You have to subscribe to whatever platform you are listening to this on. Give it to your friend. Give it to your dad and tell him you think that he's not worth the $19 million that they paid for Marlon Brando. Whatever it is that gets more people listening to this. Thank you for listening. Bye.
Goodbye for now.